Thank you. The chair now recognizes Ranking Member DeLauro for closing remarks.
Thank you very, very much. Let me just say one thing about paid leave. You may or may not know this because I have been here for 34 years, 32 on this committee. But in 1997, I introduced the Paid Family and Medical Leave bill. I actually worked for Senator Christopher Dodd, who introduced the first family and medical leave legislation, which took several years to pass, and finally passed by President Clinton. And we knew at the time that we couldn't get paid leave, so I've been on that mission since I arrived in this institution. I lead and author the Family Act. It guarantees 12 weeks of paid leave to all workers. The lack of having a paid leave program costs this economy about $22.5 billion a year. So I hope my colleagues would support that bill and that you can look at it, and I would hope to get your support for workers by supporting the Family Act, again, introduced in 1997. So I'm not talking about particular administrations. I just think we have to meet the moment and do what's right for American families across the board. And it's particularly helpful for women as well. Let me also make this statement to you, because I do believe you have very much, and you talked about, as I talked about being a daughter of a garment worker, you're the daughter of a teamster. So you have some idea of the history of what the labor movement has meant in the United States. And what it has done, as I said in my remarks, created the middle class in this country. And but if I were you, and I just mean this very, very sincerely, you head up the department that is central to what happens to working men and women in this country. If you can, and I don't know if this is possible for you, but your values with regard to this issue, and quite frankly, the values of others who have proposed a budget, and the disconnect between your values and the budget presented are really stark. And whatever way that you can find, I don't want to invade your space or how you navigate the direction of what you believe and what is occurring. I think you have to come to grips with that. Some of my colleagues here today would, when they smear regulations from labor laws, we need to remember what working conditions were like for U.S. workers before the enactment of our labor laws and the promulgation of the associated regulations and standards when we deal with OSHA or MSHA, these efforts. And it was the first Secretary of Labor who was a woman, Frances Perkins, who was my role model, you know. She dealt with what happened in regulations after the Triangle Fire. It was massive loss of life, and particularly of women. And I wrote a book in 2011, and the opening graph of that book, and I'm going to read it. It bears repeating that the reasons companies do not feel free to poison us, to sell us spoiled meat, lock our daughters up in ninth-floor sweatshops with no fire escapes, employ our underage sons in coal mines, force us to work 13-hour shifts without overtime or a break, or call in private armies to fire rifles at those of us who dare strike for higher wages is not because companies experienced a moment of zen and decided to evolve. No, they were forced into greater accountability and social concern by the legitimate actions of a democratic, that's a small d, a democratic government. In other words, if we depend on goodwill, we are all screwed. That is the opening paragraph of my book. You have the enormous responsibility of making sure that workers on the job are safe, in addition to their wages and a whole variety of other things, and to look at those who would want to dismiss regulations, speak about whatever kind of a market that they want. would allow us to go back to an era when workers, men and women, were abused in the workforce. And I don't believe that you want to do that. I also was very concerned when we were talking here today about you're in charge. But Elon Musk announced the deferred resignation program that has gutted your staff. But you won't share data on the impacts of the response to our letters or to our questions at this hearing. So I have to wonder, is Elon Musk in charge? Should we ask him the questions? Are the questions best directed to him? Or are you, the Secretary of Labor, in charge of the Department of Labor's staff? We did get a response. We wrote to you 2 months ago, the first, and I mentioned this to you over the phone. We wrote 2 months ago to you, myself, Senator Murray, Senator Baldwin, Congressman Scott, Senator Sanders, expressing concerns about the staffing reductions and office closures. We got a letter yesterday, a one-page letter, no information about the number of employees that have been fired, placed on administrative leave, or who took early retirement options. My colleague, Mr. Hoyer, asked about this, but you have to provide to this committee, and I hope you will commit to do this. You have to commit to doing this. A list of the programs the Department of Labor whose funding has been cut, frozen since January 20th, along with what was the criteria for gutting or freezing those funds. I'm all for cutting. I cut Job Corps programs in the past that were not working. Give us the criteria on which these programs were cut. We may agree with you, but we have a dialogue, agree or disagree on what's happened. We have no information. We're just told that there was a $2 trillion goal that had to be met for saving, and therefore, let's cut, without any thought about consequences of any of these cuts. You need to provide the committee with a number of employees at department by agency who received a reduction in force notification. And will you provide this committee the number of probationary employees by agency whose employment at the department was terminated? You have to provide the committee the number of employees at the department by agency who accepted early retirement offers. And we need to do that as quickly as possible if we are to address the appropriations for this department moving forward. Let me also mention to you the cuts in, we've talked about training programs, upskilling, workforce. Yes, and I told you about registered apprenticeships. I've been fighting for that for years, and I don't want unregistered apprenticeships. I think it's a boondoggle, and it's BS. It's registered, so we know what's happening, and that people have a job at the end of the line. But the 2026 budget proposal slashes job training programs by $3.6 billion. That's a 35% cut. That's opportunities for American workers. The president is asking to cut these funds while he administers disastrous policies that increase the cost of living for the middle class. We talked about WIOA. We appropriated 2025, and understand that 2025, the numbers are based on 2024. That's the budget. That's what, I didn't vote for it, but everyone on the other side of the aisle voted for a continuing resolution that says, let's continue the 2024 budget. And in that 2024 budget for 2025, the Congress appropriated $2.9 billion for WIOA grants to states and for job training programs. It's a violation of the law and of the Constitution to steal the appropriated funds from this committee or any other committee and move the dollars wherever you want to. No, it's against the law. And let me just say, and you don't have to answer these questions now, but I'm going to submit it. Are you planning to freeze and withhold congressionally appropriated funding for WIOA job state grants? Do you commit to following the law and fully obligating funding that Congress appropriated for WIOA job training state grants in fiscal year 2025? How many fewer participants would be served as a result of these proposed cuts? How would that impact the hiring needs of employers looking for skilled workers? Is there a role for publicly funded workforce development programs, or is your goal to only have workforce training by private companies? These are questions that we need to have answered. And I just say to you that, I'm sorry, OSHA closings. offices closed. Louisiana, the only office in Louisiana for OSHA is closed. The only office in Oklahoma closed. In Arkansas, most of the office is in Illinois, over half in Georgia, the Florida Panhandle, the Great Lakes region. MSHA, deeper cuts. You restrict inspector travel. It's been pointed out with regard the mining incidences in the first 4 months of 2025. But that staff has been cut and offices closed. I do believe you fundamentally, you believe in workers' rights and safe workplaces. But I think you're in an environment where there may be others who don't share those values. And they're demonstrating it by the presentation of their budget. And we've heard about these cuts, not from you. You retweeted from Doge, what the cuts. iLab, Wanto, those grants cancellation were announced by Musk's Doge account and retreated, and you retreated that news. Madam Secretary, the American worker is relying on you and relying on us to make sure that we don't gut the worker programs that people have lived and died for in this country, and to move forward. It is an awesome responsibility. I wanted to be, and I was interviewed for the position of Secretary of Labor in the Obama administration. And when he asked me what I wanted to do, I said I wanted to be Frances Perkins. I want to protect the rights of American workers, men and women, protect children, guard against forced labor, make sure our trade agreements are worker-centered. I believe you have those concerns as well and care about them.